Hello, my name's Emma Turner. I'm Research and CPD Lead for a trust, but I've also been a primary education teacher and senior leader and head for 23 years now. And I just wanted to share with you some of the things that I've found out since the beginning of the first lockdown that have really helped with delivery of online longer sessions when working with different groups. Now, this is not going to be a how-to tech video because I am the least technological person that you will ever meet. But what I have done is spend hours and hours and hours delivering content, facilitating content online. Some of the things that I've learned about what works, what doesn't work, I'm hopefully going to share with you today that you can either use or pass on or whatever you want to do with it. So I'm going to share a few screens with you to show you some of the main things that I've been going through. So let's just have a little look at this. So let's have a look here. Now, the first thing I would say is this is a screen from one of my courses, from one of our SKIP programs. And you'll notice that whenever I'm presenting or whenever I'm delivering, the first thing I always have is a holding screen. So the holding screen I put on before we start, and it just means that everybody knows they're in the right place. If you're on Teams, you're in the right channel, you've joined the right Zoom meeting. And the other thing that I do is I have something playing in the background, some kind of music or maybe a bit of a podcast, but there's some audio there so people can double check that their video works, that their audio works, and that they're in the right place. Because there's nothing more frustrating than going to join a meeting or join some training, join whatever, and you're thinking, am I in the right channel? Am I in the right place? So actually a welcome, you know, you're here, you're in the right place. And then a little list of instructions for your participants, be that students or adults. So what they're going to need. So have they got everything that they need? And have they actually checked their audio before they start as well? So that you've kind of done a little bit of troubleshooting with that. So the first thing I would say is make sure you've got a holding screen on whatever you're doing. And also a little bit of music in the background is always really nice. And what I tend to do is to link whatever background music I'm playing to whatever the content of the course is going to be. And that leads into a little bit of a chat sometimes about what the content was, what the link was. Just makes it a little bit more human. And if you've read Doug Lemov's Teaching in the Online Classroom, he talks a lot about dissolving the screen. And little things like that help to kind of dissolve the screen a little bit and get a bit of discussion going rather than you talking to a screen and then not knowing who's out there in the abyss or the seance. You know, you're talking, is there anybody there? Right, so I'm going to skip through to another couple of slides. So these slides here, or these pictures here, the first thing I'll say is you'll notice that there is very little text on here. There's only one word on there. One of the things that I've learned from delivering online for a long time now is that actually text is really difficult to access for a lot of people because the size of their screen isn't necessarily as big as the size of the screen that you would ordinarily be using back in a classroom or a training room or wherever. So you can't rely on the fact that children or participants can actually read in enough depth what you've got on that screen. So I tend to now record whatever session I'm doing so people can access it, stop it, start it, but use pictures, an awful lot more pictures, images, diagrams, so that I know that they're easier to see and people aren't sort of straining like somebody's lost at a bus stop trying to read a timetable. Also means that the kind of the cognitive load of whatever you're looking at isn't necessarily as great because you're not people aren't trying to read as you're speaking. You've actually just got the pictures there which you can talk around. So everybody will be familiar with guidelines for meetings, for training, for whatever. But what I would say about those guidelines is a bit like classroom teaching in that you may well flash those guidelines up at the beginning of any session or any lesson that you're teaching, but actually unless you genuinely stick to them, it's a little bit of a paper exercise, a bit worthless. So actually if you do expect everybody to participate, then you need to make sure that everybody is participating. If you want cameras on, it's insisting on cameras on. If you want people to interact, making sure that they do, and finding those strategies to encourage that kind of behaviour. Otherwise, when we kind of say the rules or the guidelines at the beginning of a session, then actually it's a bit like in teaching when we're in the classroom and we say these are our class rules and then we don't actually follow those up. So actually making sure that our guidelines for online learning and online sessions, we do pick up on those as we're going through. The one on the picture of the chap standing at the desk, you will notice that I am stood up. After months and months of sitting down, training, delivering, teaching, it just doesn't work. If you are able to stand and stand for a longer period, I would thoroughly recommend standing to teach, standing to stand and deliver, to stand and deliver your content, because it's so much more natural. As teachers, as educators in the classroom, training room, wherever you are, you deliver most of the time standing up. You walk around your classroom, you interact, and so your gestures, your body language, everything is geared around being on your feet. And actually, not only is it an alien concept to deliver to a screen, but then to kind of seat yourself in this static position really kind of impedes the natural flow of what you're saying. So I would say also stand up as much as you can. The other thing about standing up is that it's much better for you as well. I was finding I was getting neck pain, back pain, shoulder pain from sitting down for so long. So actually standing up, being on your feet, moving around that little bit more is so much more beneficial. Gets your steps up as well. And it also means if you're going to the cupboard or the bookshelf, or if you're annotating on a flip chart, you're actually doing it in a much more natural way. The picture thing on the left, I've mentioned that I use pictures rather than text, and I put as few things on the screen as I possibly can, because I don't know what people can see, how they can interact with it. And also you can use these pictures as kind of like retrieval tests or memory joggers. At the end, I'll flash the pictures up and I'll say, right, what did this one mean, or what were we talking about when we were looking at that one? It's like a little memory jogger. Talking of jogging, neat little segue there. At the bottom left, you'll see a picture there of a runner. If you are in a home office, a little room, wherever you're kind of, I'd say broadcasting, like some kind of radio DJ, but wherever you're delivering your content from, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be very isolating. It's going to be indoors. It's going to be quite lonely. And also it's very draining. And what I've learned is that actually the worst thing to do when you've been delivering online content all day, for me, was to sit down and then scroll through my device on social media, or watch telly, or do something else involving a screen. And what I've found is that getting outside as much as possible, and it seems like basic common sense, but common sense doesn't necessarily translate into common action. Get outside. It's so important to maintain that connection with the outdoors and with exercise. And I've got like a rough correlation now for me. For every 1 hour that I'm presenting online, I need to do at least a kilometre's run or walk. So if I've done 8 hours of presenting online or delivery online, I'll go out and do an 8K run or sort of 6 to 8K walk or something. Make sure I've been out walking, connecting with somewhere other than the space in which I am delivering the content. And if not, I've got a treadmill in my garage. So I'll go on the treadmill and I literally walk for that far, just to kind of decompress, because it is incredibly draining talking into that lamp, into that little dot on your laptop all day. The next one is music, that little picture there. I use an awful lot of audio in my presentations. Normally, I will have things playing in the background. I'll have holding music. I'll have music that connects to what we're learning about. I'll have things that are just kind of there to lift the spirits. It's just to try and make that experience a little less kind of one-dimensional. So it's not just looking at stuff on a flat screen. It's actually more of, I want to say an experience, but that sounds a bit woolly. But actually there's more to it. There's more interest for people. And I'm not talking about, you know, making a complete playlist, bringing in a violin and having like a cello in the corner of the room. I'm just talking about occasionally having audio, having video, having something playing in the background while people are logging in or over lunch, just to make the experience a little bit more interesting for participants. The one on the bottom there, the glass of water, is so obvious, but we don't do it because we don't necessarily have the same scheduled breaks when we're presenting online. We forget to drink, then we get a massive headache because we're looking at that screen all day. So it's making sure that you drink and that you encourage those people who are learning with you as well to stop and have enough breaks. I was on some training the other day where the delivering person delivered for 2 hours straight without a break. That's far too long by any stretch of the imagination. that digital fatigue is real. Watching on a screen for long periods of time is really, really difficult. So building in breaks to drink, stand, to move, to walk around is so much more important, and we need to be aware of that when we're presenting our content so that we can ensure that people's attention is maintained. So we've got the kind of little shift in what we're doing to pull back that attention. So I would say if you would normally have a break after every 20 minutes in whatever you were doing, that needs halving. It can be as simple as like 1 or 2 minutes, but there needs to be that looking away from the camera, that looking away from the screen, and making sure that you've got time to digest what's been said, that people have got time to digest what's been said, you've got time to gather your thoughts, have that drink of water, then go on to the next bit. So if you wanted to pause now, before I change to the next screen, now would be a good time to pause. If you're still with me, we'll carry on. So next ones here are just about some strategies to think about and to use with people who are with you on your training or your delivery. The first one is dead easy. It's about a ruler and a marker pen. It's so blindingly obvious and really straightforward. I was finding it really difficult to keep track of who was responding to questions in the sessions that I was delivering. When you're normally in a classroom or a training room, you know, because you're interacting with the people that are in the room, that you've had loads of questions from, loads of answers given to you from over that part of the room or over that part of the room, or you think, oh, nobody from the front said anything, or nobody from the middle said anything, or, you know, everybody seems to be answering from this group over here. It's really difficult to keep track of that online, even more so if people haven't got their cams on. So one of the things that I would do is get a ruler, and obviously a ruler is numbered 1 to 30, which is broadly the number of children in a class, although when I'm teaching, I don't think I've ever had a class of less than 30, it's normally about 36. And all I would do is have my register of whoever's in my session down one side with the numbers, and as anybody answered a question, I'd literally, with a whiteboard pen, put a dot next to the number on the ruler. When my ruler is full, great. Why do I use a ruler and a whiteboard pen? Why not use a piece of paper? Because it's live, because I can basically rub it off and start again, and I don't have to create another piece of paper or another list or whatever. And I've always got a ruler to hand, and I've always got a whiteboard pen to hand. So I can literally dot it and cross it off, and then I can begin to see the patterns of who's answering what, where, and when as well. ABC, really straightforward again. So when you're throwing a question out there, instead of throwing the full question out there, is to maybe give 3 versions of the answers, like a multiple choice, but actually encouraging everybody to just type A, just type B, just type C in. Or if you've got younger children or you just want to see people's faces on the screen, encouraging them to write A, B or C on their whiteboard and hold that up to the screen. Now, the reason I say A, B and C rather than a full answer is because, again, people are very tiny on your screen and you can't see them. But if they've done a big A, big B or big C, you can see it in that gallery format. So A, B or C, they have to type either into the chat or hold it up so you can actually see it. And it doesn't mean that you're then doing this trying to see what they've actually put. You can see A, B, C or 1, 2, 3 or whatever options they are. The other thing that a lot of younger children will like with ABC is actually having some kind of, if it's not ABC, some kind of physical response. So, I mean, I was talking to my skit students the other day and I was saying about, I still used to use ABC with my year 6s. We'd have a big A for a capital A, we'd have a little buzzy for a B, and then, I know it's not C, but we used to say, because it made the sound C, we'd go like that. So they can actually show you something physical. Same with cubes for responses. This works with adults, works with students as well. Everybody has 5 cubes at the beginning of the session. Put them on the left-hand side of your workspace, wherever you're working. The aim of the day or the aim of the session is to move your 5 cubes from the left of your workstation to the right of your workstation. And the way that you move them from left to right is by interacting with the session. So every time you've interacted with the session, typed in an answer, contributed to a discussion, shared your work, whatever it is, you get to move a cube from left to right. And then at the end of the session, you know, you can ask pupils to message you, type in how many did you manage to move? Did you move 3? Did you move 2? And you will know this because you will have obviously been leading the session. But it's just a reminder for participants that they actually have got to contribute and to contribute throughout, So moving those things, they don't have to be cubes if they haven't got them. I've done it with, asked people to collect 5 pens or 5 pencils or even 5 little bits of paper, torn up bits of paper. The idea is you move them from left to right, and it is a physical, visual reminder of how much they are interacting. And obviously you can vary the number of times you want the interactions. Bottom left is half. Halve your content. However much you think you're going to get through online, you won't. So I've found very much that everything I used to deliver with my learners live, I've either got to scrap half of it or make it so tight and so succinct that we reduce the overall input by half. Everything from technological issues, people not being able to log in or see things, moving between breakout groups, everything eats into that time budget that you've got. So actually, especially when you're first starting to deliver online, is to get your lesson plan and halve it. It's a bit like when most people first start teaching and they have these, grand plans for a lesson that's going to include this, 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 and this. They get into the classroom and realise, oh crikey, I've got to manage all of these other factors as well. And actually, I need to reduce my content by half. Same for kind of online delivery. And also, not least for the fact that you're not in a space with a roof over it where everybody's received the same kind of message in the same way. You can't check for understanding in the same way. So you kind of need to build in more time for checking for the understanding than actually delivering the content, because you can't see all those assessment cues that you would normally see in a normal classroom or training room environment. So it's being mindful of cutting your content or streamlining your content so that your delivery is reduced. The next one is a flowchart. Now, I've tried so many ways of writing down notes for myself about how I'm going to use my content, or my notes for the lesson, my notes for presentation, my notes for delivery. And all I found is that I ended up doing this constantly. And so people would be seeing me delivering online and they basically just see the top of my head, which is not good because obviously the hairdressers are shut and you can see my roots. But what I now do is to put it all on a flowchart. So if I'm using slides, each one of those boxes on the flowchart is a slide, and I make a little note for myself about the key points that I want to say. The reason that I do that, or I have to do that, which I would never do in a training room or never do in a live lesson, is because you're not getting that natural flow. You're not getting those natural breaks with the people to think about what you're going to say next. It's very much kind of a constant delivery almost. So you need to know where you're going. And also you're relying a lot on pre-prepared screens or pre-prepared resources that you've made. And you can't keep the exact sequence of every session that you've made in your mind. So you need that kind of physical representation of it. Having that flowchart up, and I find that I either stick it to the wall in front of me so I'm looking directly at it, or having it as close to laptop level as possible stops me from doing this. Not that that's a bad thing, but it just helps to, as a reminder of what's on the next screen. It helps to keep the flow much more natural. Now, the little baby there in the bathwater is just a reminder that good teaching is good teaching, regardless of whether you're doing it online or whether you're doing it virtually, synchronously, asynchronously, whether you're doing it remote, whatever it is, versus face-to-face in the classroom. Good teaching is good teaching regardless. And there is a temptation, because we're using new platforms, new tech, new tools, to forget what the principles of good teaching and learning are. And the classic one I've heard about this morning is a piece of software where you can highlight a child's piece of work and give individualized feedback on it, and then send them off on that and do this and do that and click here and click there. Now, that's a very interesting piece of software, but if we go back to teaching and learning, we think about marking and the efficiency of one-to-one marking where it's got an audience of one, we wouldn't necessarily do that level of detailed marking for every single child in that session, for every session. So what I'm saying is, just because a piece of tech can do something doesn't necessarily mean that it can do what is actually principles of really good teaching and learning. So when we're looking at delivering online or we're delivering remotely, is to actually remember to ask ourselves, would I do this in my classroom? Or would I try and replicate this in my classroom? So is my delivery tight? Is it succinct? Is it focused? And am I having to work much harder than the children in the room, in the session? Because actually, if we're still the one who's working the hardest out of everybody, then we've kind of got the balance of our sessions flipped the wrong way. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater in the rush to create super whiz bang things with link to this and hyperlink that and this, that, and the other. We are still, as educators, the most precious resource that the children have in front of them. You know, we are still the people with the knowledge about the teaching and learning. The tools that we use can help to facilitate great teaching and learning, but actually it's not a case of the more tools we use, the better our teaching and learning becomes. Principles of great teaching and learning are still the same, regardless of whether you're delivering online, remotely, or whether you're delivering face-to-face in a classroom. So it's just a kind of reassurance to say that just because Mr. X or Mrs. X down the road can use 24 different pieces of tech to deliver their phonics session, or, you know, this person here is using multiple different platforms and video streaming software and this, that, and the other to produce their history lesson, does not necessarily equate with those two sessions being better. They may be amazing, but the tech itself doesn't make it great. Things like whiteboards, pens, flip charts, paper, practical resources shown on screen are still just as valid and just as useful as amazing whiz bang graphics and platforms. So it's just a reassurance, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you want to have a break now, just change screens, or you can stay with me. So the top left one is about breathing. And I'm really bad at this. I don't mean I'm really bad at breathing. I would be dead if I was not very good at breathing. I mean, I'm just providing breathing space. I've got a lot better at this since March. Is providing time for people to just stop in a session. It's so difficult to follow content online. The stopping, the starting, the pausing, the pressing, the organising the resources, that am I in the right place? But actually what we need to provide is space for ourselves and space for others within the session. So it's not being afraid of the pauses in a session. The temptation when I first started delivering online content back in March was to, if I'd got an hour, fill an hour with me talking. Actually, nobody wants that. Not even my mother. You know, you don't want an hour's content. Is to provide those same spaces, breaks and thinking time that you would in an ordinary session, and not to be afraid of the break. It's to actually say, look, I'm going to give you some time to do this. I'm going to remain online. I'm here. But actually you need 10 minutes, you need 5 minutes. And also when we're teaching, we know in the classroom face to face that there is an ebb and flow to the lesson. There will be periods of lesson where it's very intense, very teacher driven, you know, very highly interactive, teacher led. And there will be other points in the session where the teacher is doing less and the children are doing more. Now, we still need to replicate that online, not least because while the students, while the delegates, whatever, are working on something, we need to gather our thoughts, breathe for the next thing we're going to say. You know, when they produce a Hollywood film and it's, you know, hour and a half, 2 hours long, they did not film that in one take. They did a little bit, they had a break. They did the next bit, they had a break. And it's the same with delivering content online. We need to deliver, stop, go back, think about what we're going to do next. What's the next scene? What's the next bit I need to do? Then come back and deliver that. So just breathe, provide that ebb and flow to your session. The next little chap here with the head, the feet, the hands is about body language as well. And I've said it at the beginning, I'll say it again. If you're sat in a chair, it's a very, very restrictive way in which to teach. You're penned in, you don't move around, you don't gesture as much, you don't use your body as much. Teaching is a very, very nuanced kind of physical process we wave our hands, we step, we point, we move around. And we need to kind of replicate that as much as possible, not only to kind of dissolve the screen, as Dublimov says, but actually to deliver in an authentic way. So the more we can get on our feet, the more of our whole selves we can get on the screen, the better. The more people can see the way that we lean, that we use our hands, our bodies, our eyes, whatever, to indicate the content. The more you can do that, the better. And the better it is to watch as well. Just watching somebody's face talking for like 2 hours is horrific. The next one is the temperature. Take the temperature of the room that you are in. You do that constantly in a face-to-face environment. You look around and you think, oh, they're flagging a bit. Oh, they're really on fire with this. Everything's racing. But we need to replicate that online. So whether that be, everybody's cameras on, let's just give me how you feeling, are you tired, do you need a break, do you need to do this, would now be the good time to go for lunch, or would you want to do another 10 minutes? And then checking in every so often, how did we feel about that last question? Rate yourself from 1 to 10 about how well you understand it, or rate yourself from 1 to 10 about how confident you're feeling about moving on now. So taking that temperature of the room, both in terms of understanding of the content, but also the ability of people to interact with the content because of how they're feeling. There are many, many ways to do that. You can do little quizzes, little discussions. You can have, sometimes I'll put up pictures and say which one of these pictures resonates most with you, with how you're feeling at the moment. People might do it with emojis, people might do it with pictures, but it does occasionally feel a bit false, but this is a very false environment. And actually, we still need to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the learners by checking in with how they're understanding the content, but also what their fatigue levels and interactivity levels are like as well. Which kind of links to the bottom one about feedback. So building in time to feedback. So building in time to think, for people to respond to you, to type questions in, using break times to say, you can go off and I'll be here for 15 minutes, tell me how you think it's going. Or asking people to do votes or polls or just thumbs up, thumbs down. And also, if you are delivering online and you're delivering with adults, is actually, rather than asking people to fill in like multiple extra forms and you've got to trawl through, contacting people or asking a couple of people to sort of give you really honest feedback about the quality of what the delivery was like, what it felt like after the session, to really refine your practice. We are all in a very unusual situation in that we're kind of having to feel our way through this. And just as in the early stages of our career, we would have been mentored and supported and had that feedback from a trusted colleague, from a trusted mentor. So we should also be seeking that at the moment to refine our delivery, make it more efficient, make it more effective. So time for feedback is really important. Now that brings me to the end of kind of what I was going to say. Let's just stop sharing that. And that brings me to the end of all my little top tips. As I say, I've been doing this since March. Full days, often about 11 hours, with sort of training sessions back to back with various things. I really hope that's been helpful. As I said, it's not tech, it's just kind of what works in terms of being helpful. So I hope it was helpful for you. Let me know what you think, and best of luck. We're all trying our absolute hardest, and thank you for listening, and thank you for what you're doing for our children as well.